In the first 10 months of 2025, American employers announced the elimination of more than 1 million positions.
Major layoffs have dominated headlines of the tech world since the start of 2026 as artificial intelligence becomes more prominent.
Oracle has laid off nearly 30,000 employees, and the way it was done is certainly shocking.
Amazon is preparing for another major round of layoffs. The company is expected to cut around 14,000 corporate jobs,
a figure that represents a 65% increase over the previous year and the highest volume of workforce reduction since the global pandemic of 2020.
A string of corporate layoffs in recent weeks in articles, journal, even white-collar workers.
We did a joint research investigative story with this using Gabrielle Fonrouge, our retail reporter on .com, myself, Frank Culling, and we looked into this. 48,000 jobs at UPS, 14,000 at Amazon, 1,800 at Target. A slew of layoffs has raised fears that AI is already whacking corporate jobs.
The following analysis examines the 7 layers of corporate layoffs. These levels are framed as a natural progression from subtle individualized actions to sweeping systemic transformations that redefine the nature of labor itself. This progression maps the evolution of workforce reduction from a hidden interpersonal managerial tactic to an overt macroeconomic and technological force. The early levels are about managing individuals and cost, while the later levels are about corporate survival and adaptation to systemic change. The journey from quiet firing to AI-driven redundancy reflects a shift from denying the need of layoffs to openly acknowledging that the very nature of required labor is being fundamentally and permanently transformed. The contemporary labor market in 2025 is characterized by a low hire, low fire paradox, where headline unemployment remains stable at 4.4%, yet corporate hiring rates have reached their lowest levels since 2013. While the broader economy appears resilient, the underlying structural reality is one of intense recalibration. Large-scale layoffs are no longer infrequent tsunamis, but had evolved into forever layoffs, which are smaller and more frequent waves of reductions, designed to maintain lean operations without triggering massive public backlash. Through November 2025, the total number of announced job cuts reached 1.17 million, signaling that corporations are aggressively defending margins in an era of softening consumer spending and rising operational cost. The DOGE impact remains a primary driver, as federal restructuring initiatives led to nearly 300,000 direct and downstream job losses. However, the private sector is simultaneously grappling with most pandemic overhiring corrections and the early stages of an artificial intelligence transition. This environment provides the backdrop for the 7 levels of layoffs, beginning with the most covert method of managed attrition. This is the most passive and deniable form of workforce reduction. It begins not with a formal announcement, but with a series of managerial actions designed to encourage an employee to leave voluntarily. An employee might be gradually sidelined by being given mundane tasks, excluded from key meetings, or passed over for promotions. The goal is to create an environment so unfulfilling that the employee chooses to depart, saving the company from severance pay, unemployment claims, and the negative publicity of a layoff. In practice, this is a cost-saving measure disguised as natural turnover, but it relies on managerial pressure and often creates a toxic, anxious atmosphere for those who remain. Quiet firing operates through the deliberate degradation of the employee experience. Managers may withhold coaching and development opportunities, fail to recognize good work, or initially provide minimal support for difficult assignments. This tactic often leaves workforce in a state of professional isolation, where they feel unwelcome and undervalued. From a legal perspective, these actions can cross the line into constructive discharge. where working conditions become so intolerable that a resignation is no longer considered voluntary. A significant instrument of level 1 layoff in 2024 and 2025 has been the strict enforcement of return to office RTO mandates. While executives often frame these policies as necessary for collaboration, surveys indicate that 25% of high-level leaders hoped such mandates would drive voluntary turnover. This strategy targets top talent and diverse employees who prioritize flexibility, effectively using geography as a filter for headcount reduction. The psychological impact of level 1 tactic includes shattering assumptions about fairness and safety in the workplace. When employees perceive that the removal is being engineered through neglect rather than performance, organizational trust evaporates. This leads to a defensive posture where survivor employees disengage, performing only the bare minimum required to maintain employment, while they actively seek external opportunities. Here the process becomes more formalized but remains targeted. Companies use performance review cycles not just for development, but as a mechanism to identify and terminate those deemed underperformers. This often coincides with stack ranking systems, where managers are forced to label a certain percentage of their team as needing improvement or failing to meet expectations. The rationale is to maintain a high performance culture and improve overall productivity. In reality, this method can be subjective, politicized, and used as a pretext to shed higher salaried veterans or deserters without declaring a broad layoff. It is a surgical cut framed as meritocracy. Level 2 reductions are often achieved through attrition, that is, not replacing those who leave, and incentivized early retirement, though direct termination remains the primary tool for rapid cost reduction. HR departments utilize weighted selection criteria to justify these cuts, including seniority, skill set mapping, and multi-factor performance scores. However, research suggests that such downsizing rarely improves long-term white-collar productivity and often results in survivor syndrome, where the remaining workforce suffers from guilt, fear, and decreased innovation. The dirty dozen symptoms of organizational dysfunction, including conflict, loss of trust, and rigidity, frequently emerge when performance culling is used as a standalone strategy. To mitigate these effects, McKinsey recommends that leaders focus on role modeling and fostering conviction, ensuring that the transformation is tied to a clear and shared purpose rather than just numerical targets. Without this alignment, the selective trim can degrade the cultural health of the company, making it less resilient to future challenges. At this stage, the rationale shift from individual performance to organizational efficiency. Leadership announces a restructuring or reorganization after following a merger, acquisition, or a shift in strategic priorities. Entire departments like overlapping marketing teams or legacy IT units are consolidated. Roles are declared redundant and employees are let go not for poor performance, but because their function is deemed no longer essential to the new corporate structure. These layoffs are presented as a necessary step for future growth and synergy, focusing on positions rather than people, though the human impact is identical. Strategic restructuring is a deliberate effort to right-size the organization to a specific target size that can effectively carry out new work objectives. This often involves a target operating model or TOM review to clarify roles and governance. For instance, in an M&A scenario, redundant administrative or back office functions are often the first to be eliminated to prioritize or realize the promised synergies of the deal. The complexity of level 3 layoffs lies in the ripple effect on team dynamics and workflow accountability. When roles are eliminated, the remaining employees are often affected to absorb the task of their former colleagues, leading to burnout and inefficiency. A structural restructuring requires more than just debt management. It requires a strategic workforce plan that includes recruitment and talent development to fill new gaps created by the consolidation. When external pressures mount, such as a mixed earnings target, a sector-wide downturn, or rising interest rates squeezing profits, companies move to broad numbers-driven layoffs. Executives mandate a specific reduction in headcount, often a flat percentage, example 10% or 12% across most departments. This is a blunt instrument aimed squarely at the payroll, which is one of the largest controllable expenses. Managers are given quotas to meet, leading to difficult decisions that often lose good talent simply to hit a financial target. These rounds are publicly announced, involving severance packages, and signal to the market that management is taking decisive action to protect the bottom line. In 2025, the technology and telecommunications sector have been primary examples of this level. Intel, Amazon, Microsoft, and Verizon have all announced significant reductions to defend margins in a cooling labor market. Verizon, for example, laid off 15% of its 100,000-person workforce to manage rising costs and belt tightening. These broad reductions are often a response to market conditions and softening consumer spending. They serve as a signal to shareholders that the company is committed to profitability, often resulting in immediate stock price increases, as seen in the case of Amazon's January 2026 announcements. However, the statistical facade of these cuts can mask long-term damage to the talent pipeline, as entry-level roles are frequently the first to be eliminated to meet quota requirements. Level 5 involves a more fundamental retreat. A company decides to exit an entire product line, geographic market, or underperforming business unit. The layoffs are not about trimming fat, but about amputating a limb. For example, a retailer closing all physical stores to go online only, or an automaker shutting down its sedan division to focus on trucks and EVs. The layoffs here are deep and complete for the affected division. They are a public admission that a previous strategy failed, and they often involve significant write-offs and restructuring charges. The goal is survival and a reallocation of capital to more promising areas. A prime example is UPS closing nearly 120 facilities over a 2-year period to decouple its network from low-margin Amazon volume and focus on automated super hubs. This strategic exit is intended to achieve long-term efficiency, even if it causes immediate disruption to thousands of employees. Similarly, Uber's abandonment of the Southeast Asian market to focus on US strategic priorities illustrates how companies use downsizing to consolidate their competitive positioning in core regions. The strategic pivot represents a break or a stepping stone for firms that have experienced rapid, unsustainable growth. While the immediate human cost is high, the reallocation of capital is seen as essential for long-term survival in a changing global economy. However, these decisions often involve operational downsizing that permanently removes service lines, which can harm the company's reputation if handled without transparency. At this critical stage, layoffs are no longer about improving profitability, but about ensuring the company's immediate survival. Facing potential bankruptcy, crippling debt, or a catastrophic loss of market share, the company enacts drastic, often multi-wave reductions to slash its operating costs to the bone. These are emergency measures. They can include closing offices, furloughs, and cutting deep into core departments previously considered untouchable. Morale plummets, institutional knowledge evaporates, and the company operates in a state of trauma, hoping the cuts are enough to allow it to continue operating until conditions improve. The Chapter 11 bankruptcy processes is a powerful tool for this level of survival, allowing companies to restructure debt and continue operating as a going concern. To survive this process, a company must demonstrate flexibility, transparency, and prudence in its decision making. Research indicates that 11 conditions best predict the survival of large public companies in bankruptcy, including the presence of debtor in possessions or DIP loans and positive pre-filing operating income. Level 6 layoffs often follow years of artificial stability fueled by cheap money and government support. When this stability recedes, companies must act early to preserve value. Waiting too long to initiate a survival restructuring can lead to liquidating 11, where the assets are sold off rather than the company being saved. The psychology toll on the survivors in these scenarios is extreme, as a constant threat of total collapse undermines any remaining sense of job security. This represents the newest and most profound frontier. Layoffs are no longer just a reaction to critical downturns, but a permanent structural elimination of roles driven by technological displacement. Artificial intelligence, automation, and advanced softwares are not just tools for efficiency, but direct replacements for human infrastructure. This goes beyond factory robotics to include AI systems that handle customer service, legal document review, basic coding, graphic designing, and data analysis. The jobs eliminated here are not cut, they are deleted from the organizational blueprint. The company is not right-sizing for a recession. It is restructuring, re-architecting for a new operational reality where entire categories of human labor are deemed obsolete. This shift creates permanent redundancy, forcing a fundamental societal conversation about the future of work itself. In 2025, approximately 5% of layoffs explicitly cited AI as a driver, but the actual impact is believed to be much deeper through AI redundancy washing, where companies use the narrative of technological transformation to justify cuts related to overhiring. However, the structural shift is real. Job postings for repetitive tasks have decreased by 13% since the launch of generative AI models. The emergence of agentic AI in 2025 marks a paradigm shift from tools that assist to teammates that act autonomously. These systems can handle end-to-end workflows in marketing, finance, and IT, reallocating ad spend or debugging code without human intervention. This creates a state of algorithmic anxiety and identity loss for skilled professionals who find their core expertise, such as drafting contracts or data analysis, outsourced to machines. The ghost in the role phenomena describes professionals who remain employed but find their value and agency eroded as AI takes over essential decision making. This results in ontological alienation, where work no longer provides proof of one's distinctive skill or status. Organizations that ignore the psychological impact of this structural obsolescence risk undermining the very productivity gains they seek through automation. This progression from hidden interpersonal tactics to permanent technological displacement highlights a fundamental change in the relationship between capital and labor. The early levels focus on individuals and performance, while the later levels address corporate survival and systemic realignment. The shift toward forever layoffs and AI-driven redundancy suggests that the modern corporation is moving toward a model where human labor is a modular and temporary component rather than a core long-term asset. The transition from day one to day efficient, as seen in major technological firms, reflects a world where companies are hiring AI by freeing up resources through headcount reductions. This allows them to fund the next technological frontier while aggressively defending their bottom line. However, the long-term risk remains the erosion of the internal talent pipeline, as the elimination of junior and entry-level roles threatens the future of organizational leadership. The architecture of corporate displacement in 2026 requires a dual response from both organizational leaders and the workforce. For companies, successful transformation depends on moving beyond blunt instrument layoffs towards a human-centric approach to restructuring. Leaders must strategically re-onboard their teams post-reduction, treat survivors with empathy, and invest in intentional upskilling to close new capability gaps. Transparency in communication, particularly regarding the why of the transformation, is critical to maintaining the trust needed for innovation. For the workforce, the rise of structural obsolescence demands a shift towards post-conventional identity markers. Workers must move away from finding self-worth solely through title and productivity, instead cultivating skills that resist automation, such as complex decision-making, relationship management, and systems thinking. Geographic flexibility and the diversification of income streams through gig platforms or consulting can provide a buffer against the forever layoffs trend. Ultimately, the goal of downsizing should be to act as a launchpad for future growth rather than a desperate quick fix for financial pressure. Whether through managed attrition or AI-driven redundancy, the way an organization handles its workforce during a period of contraction defines its employer brand and its long-term viability in a global economy that is being fundamentally and permanently transformed. The million job losses of 2025 are not just a statistic. They are a signal that the era of traditional employment is evolving into a new reality defined by agility, automation, and the search for meaningful human contribution in an automated world. Take care of yourself and keep growing.